Um, and so what I thought I'd do first tonight is sort of frame the topic and introduce Mary, who's joining us from All Needs Planning, and we're very grateful. And I thought I'd frame it by starting with my own personal story a little bit. I'm the mom to three. My middle son, Benjamin, had a genetic condition. I will say, within reference to this financial planning session, I was fortunate enough to have a dad who was both a military man and a lawyer. So immediately upon birth of my first child, there were two things he said to me. You need a will and you need a life insurance policy. And I followed suit because I was only 27 and he gave the order, so to speak, having been a military child. And we did that. We started a will and we quickly got a life insurance policy, term life insurance policy on my oldest child. But I have to say, by the time my son Benjamin came along 2 years later, we had gotten lazy and we didn't make an adjustment to our will and we didn't think about the financial planning around it. Now, when he was born, we had no idea that he was going to have a neurologically declining progressive life-limiting illness. We didn't know. That wasn't until he was 15 months old that we found out that information. And when it came, I want to admit that I was not in an emotional state to cope with the financial planning and all of the legal aspects of his care. But again, I had the military lawyer dad who sort of put the fire under my rear end and said, Jennifer, you've got to get this will locked and loaded. You need to understand that you're going to need a guardian should something happen to your husband and to myself and my husband. And what would that look like? And who could care for my son? And it was, I have to be honest with you, say sort of unfathomable to think about it because at the time, my son was showing no symptoms really of his disorder. And so I thought to myself, how am I ever going to predict who could take care of my son when he was 12, 13, 14 years old and his disease had progressed to a point that I couldn't even in that moment envision. But we did it because my dad was standing there and I feel grateful for him to sort of motivate me because I think if he hadn't been there to say that, in hindsight, I can honestly and completely say that the emotional aspect of coping with thinking about all of these things as I was trying to cope with learning about my son's disorder, establishing his medical care team, thinking about the social services that we were going to need to take advantage of, maybe not on the day of his diagnosis, but certainly in short order, would have were overwhelming. And if my dad hadn't been there to sort of say, get started, I'm not sure I would have done it. And I think there's proof in the pudding about that. And Mary will get to this because as my son approached 18, um, my husband and I can honestly say he passed away a month before his 18th birthday, and we had not done anything to prepare for him crossing over into adulthood. Not a single thing. And so I'm so happy to introduce you to Mary. And I'm going to tell you exactly why I'm so happy to introduce you to her. Because in her skill that she came to before she became the mom of a child with special needs, um, she understands the emotional component of accomplishing all of these necessary tasks. And I think that in that, she brings a unique perspective that can help you plan, maybe mitigate some of those emotional tendencies, or at least she can acknowledge them as you're planning along the path that is necessary. And so I'm super excited to introduce you to Mary McDirmid, who comes to us. She's the Financial Planning and Growth Officer at All Needs Planning. But as I said, she is also the mom to a child. She's the mom to two, one of whom has special needs. And I know tonight that she is going to bring a perspective about this very complicated, and it is complicated topic, layered because it involves uh, social services, because it involves legal, it involves emotions, it involves so many different components that she will bring to this space. Um, a feeling of community and embracement that I think sometimes some of us require in order to accomplish this somewhat onerous task. So Mary, welcome and thank you very much for joining us, and I will turn it over to you.
Couldn't ask for a better introduction. Thank you, Jennifer and Allison, for having me. I walked my dog frantically before this just to try and tire her out. And I was like, man, the Courageous Parent Network, if I would have known it existed earlier, I would have been on the website every night, looking at the resources, trying to get myself and my brain together to be able to parent. And so I am your biggest cheerleader. I send everybody to the network. I think it's just an amazing resource to handle. I think it's very grief based, which whether your child passed or your child is in this world, you need, with a little layer of optimism around it, which is like, that's my love language. So I really like, I take this seriously. I was actually more nervous tonight than I usually am, but I think it's just because I adore this group so much. And so thank you so much for having me. We're gonna go through a bunch of slides. I'm gonna try and educate you, and I really, really, really value your time. I know how precious it is. I know how precious mine is, and so I want to make this worth it. Okay, this is your time. I need to answer some questions. I had 3 people put in questions ahead. I see you. I hear you. I'm gonna layer them in to the presentation, and if you don't get your answers because you're one of the ones that sent it ahead, please raise your hand and let me make sure I clarify everything, okay? With that being said, it is your time. So ask questions. If they're on your head, they're on somebody else's head in this room. Okay? Fair? I get some thumbs up. I got some smiles. Okay. I like it when I can see your faces because then my jokes really land and it really helps. All right, guys. So this is our group, All Needs Planning. We're, working on some language, but my favorite thing to tell people is when you're better prepared for the predictable or the controllable, the surprises seem manageable. Okay, so that's what I try and tell myself is like I can control some things in this space, and there are going to be uncontrollables. And I'm speaking as a parent of a kid with seizures, and that's kind of my wheelhouse of like these are uncontrollable. I can't do this. It's a surprise. It's a bananas world. So like what can I control and how can I make it predictable and have it be prepared and have it be done when all this other stuff over here is not. Okay? I don't need a slide about myself because Jennifer said such an amazing things about me, but this is me looking so professional. You don't know that I might be wearing like leggings under that outfit. That's a secret. Don't tell anybody, but that's probably true. So, yes, I am a mom of a kiddo with a rare disease. It's actually our specific rare diseases national day. So TSC Awareness Day. So if you know anybody that has a kiddo with TSC, we're wearing blue today. This is our day. And so I have a couple jobs. I'm a fee-based financial planner that helps families like yours. I'm also a mother. I'm a parent to Ruth and Charlie. I'm a spouse to my husband, Jay, and I'm a caregiver to Ruth. Now, the reason I say that in that way is being a parent and being a caregiver is not the same. And so I think that is a really important distinction to make that you're doing multiple jobs. You're doing so many jobs. And really, I'm going to ask you to do some work to think about this. But the overarching goal is that we would close some of those worries in your head. So that poll was very actually all the things. We want to know all the things. We want to know about, state and federal benefits. We want to know about special needs trust. We want to know able accounts. We know how to invest. Like it was pretty evenly spread. So that's good that you want to know all of those things. We're going to hit on all of them tonight. And I'm going to ask you guys to participate a little bit. Okay. Fair? I'm getting some head nods, I'm getting some thumbs up. Okay. So this is one of my favorite slides. I actually one time tried to pull off a whole presentation on this one slide because there's just a lot of information that you can pull from it. If I could have you guys throw in the chat, what stage are you in? Are you in stage 1, which is birth to 3? Are you in stage 2, which I consider all of school? Are you in stage 3, which is your child's, I would say 19 to your retirement? And are you in stage 4? The reason I visually lay this out is kind of what Jennifer said, is if you can look at this in stages rather than thinking only of the 18. The 18 is a really important transition. I'm not downplaying it, but there's others. even after that, that we kind of bury our heads about. One of the big ones is um, we're going to retire. So can we um, take care of another kiddo while we're not working, if that's part of the plan? We're also going to pass away. That's the biggie. Nobody wants to talk about us passing away and our kids outliving us. And so I like to show you this just to get your brain ready to think about multiple transitions. Okay. Jennifer, is there anybody in stage one in that chat?
There is a
Give that
person.
person all the hearts and high fives. Whoever that person is, hearts and high fives. We all remember the beginning, right?
There are
Newborn, new diagnosis. Okay.
there are a few in stage one, many
Okay.
in stage two and three.
Okay. Get everybody, all those, everybody knows this, right? New diagnosis, new baby. How hard is that? We all know this, right? Hearts and high fives to those people. You're thinking about this way ahead of everyone else. Not that everyone else isn't as amazing, but like that's hard. Okay. That stage is hard. Now, in my 2 to 3s, everybody in 2 to 3, you're in a school setting. You're about to go into 18, which is a big transition because in the eyes of the world, your child is an adult. And then we're going to be in stage 3, which is, to me, actually, my anxiety rises. I can feel it in my chest when the school bus is not going to come anymore. So when Ruth is done with school and she's 22, what is going to fulfill her life? And I have anxiety about that. And so we all have stages where we feel, whew, when you feel that in your body, I think we should pay attention to it and then find out why you're not doing the planning around it. And then let's talk about it. I am a human. I always really disclose this up front, that wants to know all of the news, even if it's the worst news possible, so I can make a path through it. I am not like everyone else. So I know a lot of people that want to be like, I'm just going to bury it. I'm going to push it. I'm not going to do it. We will find common ground before between both of our tactics and figure it out. Okay. Is that fair with everybody? Okay.
Mhm.
All right, guys. So everybody loves a good Venn diagram. We are not out of that. So we put all of our planning into 3 buckets. Um, they cannot be pulled apart from each other. They're overlapping for a reason. And we like to think of them in the care, protect, and grow. Okay. So care is very um support plan. So a support plan would be a letter of intent, a care plan, anything that has something in writing about what you're doing for your loved one, your other family members, your spouse, anything that's written family oriented, that's written down, ADLs, doctor prescriptions. I used to have a specialty pharmacy that was super fun to deal with. All of that stuff that's not written anywhere, that's what a care plan letter of intent would be. Now, a financial plan is, how is this all going to work out in the money world? So it's, I kind of separate out investing from financial planning. Okay. Investment's definitely part of financial planning, but planning is like, what are our goals and what do we have to work with and how are we going to get to that spot? Right. It's like that when you go to a mall and you are here. Okay, you're here, your goal's down here to get to JCPenney, which probably doesn't exist anymore, and that ages me terribly. But when I'm walking into the mall and I want to get to JCPenney, what's the gap in between and how am I going to make my way there? Okay. Benefits. All right. Social Security, state waiver systems. Okay. That's benefits we're trying to talk about. And I'm going to reiterate this through this whole presentation, but we are giving our kids an amazing life financially, emotionally, community, working, all the things, and keeping them benefit eligible. Social Security and state waiver systems. Okay. Now, those systems aren't completely friends. They're kind of drinking buddies, I guess. But we have to keep our kids' asset level low to keep them benefit eligible. Okay. So if our kids are on benefits, we want to keep them on benefits, but give them an amazing life. Okay. 2 tools we can use to save money for them are an ABLE account and special needs trust. Okay. You get one thing out of this presentation, that's where we're always going to come back to. Okay. Protect is the big party section of tax, legal, and insurance. I talk about being a party because we want to be tax efficient. And sometimes we're not tax efficient for the caregiver parent, but we're going to be very tax efficient for your loved one. Legal, I'm not a lawyer. I don't want to be one. Neither does Jennifer, I heard earlier before we got on. But legal does play a big role. right? So if we need a bucket to catch our assets and it can't be directly to our kids, it needs to go into a trust. And a lawyer needs to draw up those documents. Okay. We work some great ones. We've screened out all of the lawyers probably multiple times in multiple interviews. And we found a couple great groups that we work with. And one of them is national, because I know there's an audience of people from all over. So we do try and get people really prepared to go to legal. And kind of what Jennifer said and kicked this off with, it's not always just, oh, I got to go to a lawyer and this is going to take time. It's who are my people? Who are my backups is the part that's holding you up, because you're like, if my group's not big, who's going to take on this responsibility? Okay, that really holds people up. Insurance is important. We talk about it. It kind of goes into group benefits too. So if you're employed and you have group benefits, what are you going to lose if you don't work anymore? And does that affect your child? Okay. Life insurance is a very important tool to make sure that you're protected if something happens. It's also a tool we use to fund special needs trusts down the line. Now, the grow part. Investing is very important. So we got to make sure the investments are rock solid. I really want people to have personal goals though. And some of it is my personal goals in Q1 of this year were to take 30 minutes for myself, and I had to write down what I did. Sometimes it was laying on a futon. Most times it was laying on a futon. Sometimes it was walking with my friends. Sometimes I was walking alone, but like I had to take 30 minutes for myself. And so I really encourage people to, I know we don't take care of ourselves as caregivers. I'm guilty of it, but that can only last for so long. Burnout is a real thing. Our health is a real thing. And so we got to make sure we're taking care of that. Okay. Now, as we go through each section, I'm going to go through care, and then I'm going to take a pause, and I'm going to take a breath, and I'm going to take a drink of my Gatorade. And that's when you guys can throw some questions in the chat. Okay. So when we look at care, just think of your questions and throw them in the chat. When we go through protect, think of those. When we go through grow, think of those. Okay. And then we'll have an overall questions at the end. If it doesn't fit anywhere, then we'll answer those. Okay. Everybody sound good? We do describe each section. I give you information on how to interact with my team. And then also we have an example at the end of what we've implemented for our family. So you can kind of see, this is the information, how to interact with Mary's team if we want help. And then the end has an example of a family that we worked with and how we went through these steps with them. Does that sound okay, everybody?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. All right, so in care, we have a support plan, we have benefits, and we have a financial plan. Okay, so the support plan, like I was describing, is everything we do for our kids. A fun exercise, if you want to take this on, is to have you and your spouse sit down and write everything you do for your family. Literally everything. Think about it from 6 a.m. all the way to the 24-hour cycle, and write it down on paper. Then what you're going to do is cross-reference each other, and then you're going to make a document of all of these activities so someone could pick up breadcrumbs if something were going to happen to you. Okay. It also is a good step to have other caregivers coming into your home, or respite providers if you are on some of those waiver systems, so they have a go by for things that you do, so that you can get some respite and you can get help to come into the home. Okay. I embarrassingly don't know, or didn't know before this exercise I did with my husband, when school ends, when the bus comes to our house. I didn't know that stuff, and that's embarrassing for me to admit, but he worked from home. He handled all the logistics of school for my kids. So I didn't know that. Now, on the opposite side, he does not know how to get into my chart. He doesn't know how to get to our records. He doesn't know how to set an appointment. He doesn't know how to do any of the medical system things. So like, I do believe in dividing and conquering for our families, but there has to be some kind of reconciliation so we know what each others are doing. Okay. So we want to know who provides the support, how would someone else step in, and then what are those costs? So one of our meetings that we have is really just a cost calculator. So what we're trying to do is project out future costs for your entire family unit. Specifically, though, those will last longer for our kids that have disabilities. All right, in the benefit section, we have SSI, SSDI, and DAC. Okay, so most are familiar with the first two. The last one is when we start drawing Social Security, our loved one can piggyback off of our record. So one of the questions I had was that transition from SSI to DAC, and how does that work? It is pretty technical, but what it really does is say, I like to work in stories. So let's say when I pull Social Security, my benefit is $4,000 a month. Ruth is on Social Security already and she piggybacks off my record. She's going to get about 50% of my benefit. So she'll get $2,000 a month. Now that's a lot higher number than what Social Security on her own is currently is 967 a month. Okay. Now what that triggers for us in the planning in our heads is that she's getting more income into our household. So we're going to have to spend down or we're going to have to put money into, I would suggest an ABLE account so that we can save and not have to spend down on things that we might not need in that month. Okay. So there are trigger points when our kids start to get more money into their home. One is when we first apply for SSI and we have a huge back payment coming in because it takes them a year to decide if you're SSI eligible. And the other trigger point is when we start to pull SSI, the system will change and it'll change for the better. Okay. And I know that person, I hope that question kind of answers what they had, but there is some finagling that we do with that, the way that money comes into the rep payee account and goes to an ABLE. So for those that live in states that have Medicaid waiver systems, most of all of them should, but some of them are better than others. We got to make sure we're applying for those waiver systems after we're out of birth to 3. So for those in that stage 1, you're probably in an early intervention program, birth to 3 program. Once they graduate out of that, you would want to file for the state waiver system in your state. I do have a pretty good, I'm going to send a website to Jennifer, but there is a website where you can check out every state's waiver system and what is offered. And so that's pretty good, important information for a national type of presentation like this. So you could look up New Jersey, you can look up New York, you could look up Washington, you can look up Colorado, you can look up different states' waiver systems. That has the links to it, has how to apply, so you can find out what your state provides. And then we really encourage people to apply for those waiver systems. It comes usually with Medicaid, caregiver hours, respite hours. It just depends on your state waiver system and what's provided, and nursing supports. Now the financial plan. So what we want to project out is your working years. What are your incomes? What are your expenses? And then we separate out your loved one with the disabilities expenses from the household so that we can project those out so that you can make sure we're paying for them through our working years, our retirement years, and then what is the big bucket number that we need when we're not around anymore. Okay. Super, super fun conversation. I see everybody's faces like drop. But it is necessary. Like I said, I'm the person that wants to know the information to make a path. Okay. So I think if we've been burying our head about it, let's talk about it and make sure that we are aware. Nobody has that perfectly covered, I would say. So I would say everybody needs some help in that area. We're always, like I said, trying to be tax efficient. Sometimes that does say that I'm trying to be tax efficient for your loved one. Not always that would require you to maybe pay tax, but that's things we can talk about. And then our tools that are available for funding, we have ABLE accounts, retirement vehicles, employment benefits. If your young adult is working, they provide some wages into that bucket as well. So there's different buckets coming in, and then what do we need to make sure the expenses are all paid, and what's the delta if there's extra. Okay. So ABLE, we always get a lot of ABLE questions, so we made a specific slide about ABLE. I like to think in our world, give our kids an amazing life and keep them benefit eligible. Can't go above $2,000 directly to them. ABLE and a special needs trust, right? I think of ABLE as a checking. Okay. In our world, I use that ABLE account as kind of an ins and outs for our families. Okay. The one thing people ask me about all the time is Medicaid payback. That is the downside. Not every state is Medicaid payback. And what does a Medicaid payback mean? So I'm going to tell you a story about Ruth in her future, which I believe this is probably true. But let's pretend Ruth is in her 20s. She's working at Mod Pizza. Okay. She gets $2,000 in wages from Mod Pizza and $1,000 from Social Security. Okay. $3,000 into her household. Now she pays us room and board for $500 for living in our home, and she hasn't spent down any of that other money in her account. So I'm going to put $500 into an ABLE, and she just has $2,000 into her account. Social Security, Medicaid, all of those organizations know these exist and they know that it's acceptable. This is not in any way not legal or cheating a system. This is just the way that this is the way we have to save money for our kids, okay? Now pretend Ruth does that for years and years and years and years and years, and she's accumulated a bunch of money into her Able account, hasn't spent it all down, and she passes away. She will be able to pay out any of her own liabilities, so anything she owes, and for a burial. And after that, Medicaid is going to say, hey, we're going to claw back anything that we have used to this point out of an Able account. Okay. You can like that feature, you can not like that feature. These are just characteristics of what we have to work with. And I want you to know everything you can know about something that I think is a good tool going into it. Okay. Now, my daughter had brain surgery, so that bill is high for Medicaid. So, like, we're talking about millions and millions of dollars that my daughter has racked up in Medicaid. So, like, if we were going to get an Able, there was $50,000 left, they would definitely claw back that amount of money. Okay. I mean, all the rest of the things are on here. The things that we hear from our clients that are very useful for an Able account is giving your loved one some autonomy. Okay, so that comes with a prepaid card, which is very different from a debit card. A prepaid card you have to put money onto so that they can go spend. Okay, it's not a cash type of account, but it gives them some autonomy. So if Ruth was going to go bowling, I would put money on her Able. She could go have $50 at a bowling alley and spend it on entertainment. Awesome. Once $50 are gone, card won't work anymore, but I don't get overdrafted. Okay. The parents can have a card as well. So if you have specialty groceries that you buy for your loved one, there's plane tickets you want to buy for them and a caregiver, you can use your card to do that as well. Okay. Jennifer has a question.
Yeah, so Mary, there's a question in the chat about the difference between an Able account and a special needs trust.
Yeah, we're going to get there. I have a slide on special needs trust, so I'll just write it down.
Okay.
They are very different, and we'll talk about why for sure. Good question. The one thing I do like a lot about Ables is the definition of qualified disability expenses. I think people get hung up on that as well. The government definition, very loose, which is amazing. So it's for the wellness, betterment, and health of the person. That's very vague and could be very different from person to person. One of my favorite clients has a young man who loves video games, but he is very aggressive and he destroys a TV probably every quarter. We buy a new TV out of his Able account every quarter because that brings him joy. And so those are things where you're like, oh, I could spend on that, where you might not think that that's something you can use a qualified disability expense for. Okay. One of my other questions I had sent in was a 529. So if you have 529 funds, so that is college saving funds, and Able is actually a 529A. So you can roll funds into a 529, from a 529 into an Able. It still has that $19,000 yearly contribution, so you have to stay below $19,000. And so some people would have $100,000 in a 529. You have to year by year slowly roll that over into an Able account. The question I had was about gifting. So $19,000 is conveniently the gifting amount that you can gift without doing a gift tax return. The question I had was, does that rollover count as a gift? Which it doesn't, but you can only contribute 19,000 regardless. So they're asking, hey, if I roll over $10,000 from my 529 account to an Able, can I still contribute 19? And the answer is no, because 19 is the total. So the gift allowance kind of doesn't apply to an Able if you're already contributing from another source. So you would only be able to contribute $9,000 regardless. I hope I answered that for that person, but if not, same kind of thing, let me know. All right, summary of a care plan, or sorry, the care section. How much does it cost? All the planning we do is like, where are you now? Where do you want to go? And what's the gap? And so how much is the cost of care going to be for them? How much will I need in retirement if I have another person that I'm supporting? And then what are the other goals for your family? So I've also a 10-year-old, and I have conflicting goals sometimes for her, like college. Or do I actually want to do a college fund? Do I just want to save money so she can buy a house? Because buying a house right now is crazy, right? Like there's always conflicting goals. And I think we always, like I tell people when I plan for your family, like I take these glasses off and this is your plan as two wonderful adults, but I put these glasses on and I'm going to always look through the lens of your loved one. But there are other lenses that we have to look through and make sure we're really addressing all of the goals of the entire family. Okay, before I go to protect, any questions in there, Jennifer?
No, I think they're mostly set up about able accounts and we can
Special needs
talk about
trust.
them at the
Okay.
end. Yeah.
Yep. And we're going to address the special needs trust in the next slide, the types of trust, and then I'm going to talk about the dynamic between them. Okay. So in the protect section, we talk about insurance, tax, and legal. So insurance addresses gaps in the financial plan. It also, when we come up with that big number, cost of care, that's kind of how we kind of work backwards to be like, how much term insurance do we need to cover if something happens to one of us, to make sure that cost of care and other goals are made. Um, I mean, life insurance is for premature loss. I think disability insurance is also important. It's if you have one, also, a lot of our families sometimes have one person working. If that one person working isn't insuring that income, that's also a problem. So you got to make sure if you have one income, you got to make sure you're covered. Um, we don't not cover the other spouse if they're not working. So I think that's also a misnomer of like, um, if your primary caregiver was not able to do their job, do you think you would still be able to work and contribute into the world? So that's all very insurance based, but it is very important. And then we will use permanent insurance to fund special needs trusts. So the specific type of insurance that we use is called survivorship. So it means it insures two people's lives. It's their whole life, and it doesn't benefit either of those people while they're around. It only benefits the special needs trust. The reasons we use it as well is tax-free money. So taxes are a thing when we dump money into a special needs trust. And so we're trying to get as much tax-free money into that trust as possible. And so we use permanent insurance as one of those solutions. Tax-wise, man, I shouldn't disclose this. Jennifer told me she almost worked for a law firm, so I have to disclose that I'm a recovering accountant, which is either great or awful. I can't decide as of today, but so I lived in the tax world a lot. A lot of things that get missed for our families in taxes are the biggie is if you have to remodel your home for accessibility reasons, that can be on your Schedule A to itemize. Um, the other thing a lot, and I gotta change the slide a little. The one other thing that we get missed a lot is if your child's over 18 in your specific state and you could be a paid caregiver for your own child that's now an adult, that should be a non-taxable income in most states. And that gets missed a lot. And it's really important too if grandparents are fulfilling caregiver roles for you because they don't want stuff to affect their taxes in retirement. And so just really be clear with what is taxable to you when you're getting income for being a caregiver through the Medicaid system. Estate taxes, so death tax, super fun topic to talk about, but we're all kind of in limbo until the end of 2025, whether things will revert back or not in estate tax world. And then Secure Act. So the other question I got was someone had set up a special needs trust and put $100 in it about 7 years ago. And do they need to do anything with that trust? The only thing I can think of is to make sure it is following current tax law. So if you wrote into your trust documents, hey, if tax law changes, this trust needs to be adapted to those tax laws. That is something you got to just make sure you're in your documents or you kind of review every 5 years. All right, the legal party. So as a parent, caregiver, the top lines for you. So we need to make sure our wills are in place. You have a power of attorney, which gives someone the right to help you make decisions if you're incapacitated. And you have your medical directives really written down. So do you want to be resuscitated? There's certain things for women if they're pregnant. There's a lot of things about a medical directive that you just want to have in writing. Also, what Jennifer talked about, decision-making support. So that happens around 17. You start to think about, does my loved one need a guardianship? Do they need power of attorney? Do they need any kind of supported decision-making help? Micro boards can kind of come into a effect there, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But at 17, that is when that idea needs to start formulating in your head. The place I go to, I send people if they're not in my geographic area where I know the great attorneys that do guardianship. Find an adoption attorney in your specific county because guardianship is county specific, and they can walk you through the options for power of attorney, guardianship, conservatorship. Okay. Now, a special needs trust can either be standed up, like the question I had. They had actually created a special needs trust. It has a name, it has an EIN, it can be created today. You have to put something in it. So they put $100 in it. So you can create it today. And the reason I have people create those today is especially if they have grandparents. So I love grandparents that want to help, but they have great intentions and kind of awful execution, is what I've seen. So if you want to create that trust today, they can name out their estate to that trust directly if they're going to skip you and give money to your child. They can't receive it directly because we can only have over $2,000. Okay. And then a family trust. That is a, let's say, juiced up will. So if you don't want anybody to know about your stuff and it's going to go through probate, a trust is a covered wagon. Nobody can see it. Nobody knows what you have. Nobody can see anything basically when you're alive and then once you've passed. All right. So this is like the trust slide. Okay. So this kind of dabbles into able. So we're going to talk about both, but a first party trust, they're saying it's your loved one's monies. Okay. So it's settlements, malpractice suits, when there's child support due to a divorce, if there's military pension where you name your child as a survivor, that is money that is there. It's in their name. So if your child was in some kind of settlement due to something that happened at the hospital, you sue the hospital, you settle the case, that check is in your child's name. Okay. Because it's in their name, a first party trust is created. Okay. Now, things people don't like about a first party trust, exactly what they don't like about an able, is there's Medicaid payback. Okay. So the functionality and the thought process behind that is they've been on Medicaid, but they have the money to pay for it once they're passed, then we're going to claw it back. Okay. There's no first party vehicle out there that doesn't have Medicaid payback. Okay, so able accounts and first party trusts are the big two that our loved ones can put money into. That is their money. Okay. Now, third party trusts are I would say the most used trusts that parents want to contribute to because it's everyone else except for your loved one. Your loved one doesn't contribute to a third party trust. It's everybody else in the world. Okay, grandparents, anyone else except for the beneficiary. You can name a secondary beneficiary. So because I have another daughter, I have a third party special needs trust for Ruth. And if she ends up not using all those funds, then those funds are going to go to my other daughter, Charlie. It must cover supplemental needs. Now, this is the tricky part and why we want an able and a special needs trust. These guys actually are drinking buddies. They hang out all the time. Okay. These are our friends. So a third party special needs trust gets our large assets because it can accept it, right? Able can only accept $19,000, right, a year. So we can't even name out a work life insurance to our able account. Okay. So, and this is supposed to be supplemental needs, which means no groceries and no rent out of a third party special needs trust. But what we can do is we can transfer money from a trust to an able, and we can pay for everything out of an able. We can pay for rent, groceries, all the things that they need out of there. So that's why I view a trust as a big saver and an able as a checking. Okay, there's just more flexibility with the able and what you can spend it. Now you don't want to overfund it because you can only put $19,000 in there a year, but you want to fund it enough so you can pay for everyday needs. Okay, did that answer some of the questions?
Sure. Mary, I have a question. So
Yep.
in my particular instance, my son Benjamin was never going to be, he was always going to be fully dependent.
Yep.
And we had a third party special needs trust, ostensibly to set up to care for him
Yep.
should my husband and I not have the capacity to do that thing, funded largely through insurance policies, right?
Yep.
So,
Yep.
as the primary caregiver, I carried an extra insurance policy so that if something happened to me, my whole family wasn't at deficit for lack of care.
Yep.
And so how does the special needs trust and the ABLE account, are they actually working in parallel in that circumstance, or is ABLE really directed towards the families whose children might have some independent
That's a great
access?
question. The areas you're going to need one for even for your specific situation. Let's say he turns 18, we apply for Social Security and it takes a year and you get $11,000 in back pay. What are you going to do with that? Right? Because you're not going to probably spend down $11,000. I mean, he can pay you back rent that was owed to you for living at your home, but sometimes we need to have an able just to shove extra so he stays under the 2,000, right?
Okay.
The other instance is the same one. You guys start drawing Social Security, his Social Security benefit goes up. He's getting more than $2,000 maybe into his household just from that. Are you going to spend it down or do you need a place to shove extra money?
Okay. Good.
Yep. Yep.
Thank you.
So how do these all work together, right? So I'm going to talk about micro boards, but these are all the legal items that we have on our docket. So your trust and wills, a special needs trust specifically can be standalone or it could be springable. So springable means it's in your will. So a lot of our peeps in the younger groups, they're like, I don't know kind of what my child's life is going to be like. Are they going to need a trust? Are they not? You can make it springable in your will that a special needs trust needs to be established if you pass, and there has to be some kind of, they're on government benefits, it gets created. Okay. Decision making supports, that's at 17. Are we going to need guardianship, POA? What are we going to need? Microboards are pretty new. They're very, I would say, East Coast. Has anybody been on a board of directors in here? I have been on a couple non-for-profit boards. It kind of exists like that. So it's basically a board of directors, depending on your state, how it's structured. It can be a non-for-profit, an LLC, but it's a board of support around your person. And I would say we got to take care of these other three before we go to a micro board. I'm into it, but it is an extra layer up here that we start thinking about when we're retiring. We have some time, we have some energy, but it is an amazing circle of support around your person. You start recruiting board members. We have a board in New Jersey and we have someone that was the OTPT speech person for them for basically their entire life, and their job is fun. I want Ruth to have a micro board, and the person on the board's job is fun, right? Trustees, guardians can be part of the board. The board can't actually make decisions for the person. They're just really guiding and having some continuance of what the parents have been doing. Okay. All right. Any questions there? Did I answer your able trust questions is really what I want to make sure.
So there's a couple in the chat.
Okay.
One is an ABLE account the same as a stable account? So in Ohio, is it
Yeah.
the,
Yep.
okay.
Yep.
Um,
Each state calls it something different, which is super fun. So yes, that is the same.
so someone asked, can an ABLE pay off monthly credit card bills that the disabled person has?
It doesn't function like that. You would want to pay the bill, whatever the bill is directly, not the credit card.
Okay.
So if you're like, whatever you're using that credit card for, you just flip it to the able to pay those bills.
I think you answered this question, but I'm going to ask it again because I think the answer is no. But um, someone has a son who pays rent and their share of household expenses to his parents from his SSI.
Yep.
Do the parents need to report this rental income as taxable income?
Oh my gosh, this question is this so hard. So my IRS, is this being recorded? Answer is yes, you probably should. The way this gets very tricky is then SSI is asking if you're providing that support, and then you're reporting that you are on your taxes. So it gets you in an SSI IRS argument that I don't love. Do people report it? Not most people do not, just to be really honest with you. It's the way that I've done it in the past, and it depends on what kind of agreement you have, to be really honest, is I don't call it a rental agreement. You call it a support agreement. and then it's not looked at from the IRS that you're charging someone rent and you're in a landlord tenant situation. You are in a support document situation, but then landlord tenant laws do not apply to you either. Okay. So I call it a support agreement, not a landlord tenant agreement, to not call that taxable income.
Okay, and one last question. Can a special needs trust stay in effect beyond the child's 18th birthday?
Yes.
Okay, and there we go.
Awesome. Okay. Let's go to grow. And do I have 9 minutes left? Is this end at 6?
This ends at yes, 9 o'clock. You have
Okay.
nine.
I'm gonna scream through some of these, okay? We'll probably won't get to our example, but you guys will get the slides after. So we'll probably just do that. Is that okay, Jennifer?
Yeah, we
Okay.
can, and if it goes a little over, I'm fine with it.
Okay. Okay. So I will get through the end of this and the example. You guys can always just look at the example from the slides when you get. But so on the grow part, we got to make sure, and I get this a lot when people come in, is like, I was just told this is how I should invest. I really am a big proponent of like, what do you want your money to do? And let's work backwards. Let's reverse engineer it and make sure your investments are in line with your personality type, what you want the goal to be. I always tell people the three things that when we talk about money, specifically investing: math, emotion, and logic. Those don't usually go together, but they all play a role in how we manage our money. Okay. So we got to make sure we're addressing all of them. What are your conflicting goals? And then what do you need to protect, right? So a lot of our families want to preserve as much principal as possible to make sure they can pass it to their kids, but they're going to have to pull from it to live their life, right? So those are conflicting goals that we got to make sure we address. And then we're going to match that cost of care with your funding. Like, what's funding the cost of care, working years, retirement years, and when we're not around? And are there any gaps, and how are we fulfilling those? Okay. So relax and enjoy for me, like I said, I think what my big thing is everyone comes to our first meetings with, man, I should have done this years ago. I try not to allow the should word in meetings because it's just shameless, and we already have enough of that, and I don't want to be an addition. So nobody comes to me with, man, I got everything together, just check this over. Everybody has stuff. So don't feel shame, don't feel guilt. Please leave that. And then I need you to be rested, and I want you to take as much that you can in the moments we have. Like, I used to do like a 15-minute random workout in the PTOT speech parking lot, and I think people thought I was crazy, but I was like, I gotta do something to get myself back together in this world. I kind of wanted to recruit a teacher to teach aerobic class every hour at the PTOT speech place, but it's really important for us to have you not feel that shame and guilt and have you rested. And then what are your family goals? What do you want to get back to? What are you missing? I mean, I went to therapy yesterday. I go every 2 weeks. I think it's maintenance, right? So I think you got to specifically find out what your family goals are, and we want to make sure we're addressing those as well. So the grow part, does your plan cover your cost of care? How much will you need to retire and account for another person? What are the conflicting goals? And then what are the gaps and how do we cover them? Okay. All right. I'm going to go to how we work. So this is our approach. I do like to say your goals, our approach. It's not that much different. So if anybody's worked with a traditional financial planner, this is going to look very similar, except for that cost of care. And I am very empathetic to people rescheduling, I guess, more than most would be, because I'm going to probably reschedule at some point because I have appointments and a child that I'm hanging out with as well. So I think that's the part that just we look at it a little bit differently. What an ongoing partnership looks like with us is every quarter we talk about each of these subjects. So we're going to talk about investing. We're going to review your plan. We're going to talk about your advocacy and government benefits. I think people think once we have them, then we're great, we're good to go. But waivers change based on ages and based on needs, and we got to make sure we're really addressing those. And then we're gonna make sure your legal protections and insurances are always what we need them to be. Okay. This is our whole team, and this is it. So that QR code is so dangerous, but that goes to my calendar. So if I didn't answer your questions, you want to engage with us, please click on that QR code. It'll go directly to my calendar, which is awesome and dangerous, but I like it. And then let's just go to the questions. We have 5 minutes, so I don't think we have time for the sample, the example, but I would like to answer any questions anybody has.
So I'm going to open this up, and Mary, maybe if you stop sharing screen
Yep.
now.
Yep. Let me
I'm
find
going
the
to open
button.
it up, and I'm happy to leave. We're at the hour, we're 5 minutes to the hour, and I'm happy to give us a little more space. So if someone would like to just raise their hand and ask verbally a question of Mary, feel free. I'm going to also request that if you're verbally going to ask a question, you turn your camera on so she can actually look at you and see you as she's answering your question.
Hi, Mary. I have a question.
Yeah, Stacy, go for it.
So I've read that ABLE account funds can only be used for qualified disability expenses,
Mhm.
which wouldn't include things like monthly subscriptions that the disabled adult child has, things like Netflix, Audible, any of their hobbies, going to concerts, vacations. So I'm wondering, how strictly does the disabled adult have to adhere to how those ABLE funds are used, since you're saying that they can't use a credit card to pay for those things and then pay the credit card off with the ABLE account funds. So I'm wondering how a person pays for that stuff.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, I don't know. Can you? I mean, I haven't heard that you can't pay for You can definitely pay for vacations of the
That
person
you
and a caregiver out of there.
that you can pay for a
Uh-huh.
vacation?
Yeah, yeah. Um, I can't. If the hard part where it gets really tricky is if it's a shared expense. So the reason I'm saying that is like a Netflix account, right? If it's their solo Netflix account and they're only one using it, very, very viable. If the whole family is using a login and we're having them pay for it, that's where they don't love it.
Mhm.
But if it's
What
for the
about things
person,
that are, personal to the individual, a
yeah, yeah.
subscription
Like I
to
have
other
families
things?
that specifically like one family I can imagine right now, their whole family is not celiac and their child's celiac, right? So they have to buy specialty foods for their child, so they buy all of their foods out of the Able account. That is specifically celiac related. If you're tube fed, it'd be tube feeding type of supplies, the food, all of that stuff is very specific to them, and no one else is benefiting from that.
Yeah.
The examples I give that are seem kind of like on the cusp, right? Like the example of the gentleman I know that has the TV and he destroys it every quarter. Like that's a TV in his room. If that was a TV in the living room, that's where you're like, is it shared? Is it just his? But if it is their specific expenses, it should be allowed. So like basic living expenses, housing, transportation, employment training, education, assisted technology, supportive services, legal and financial, medical health and prevention.
What about just entertainment, hobbies,
Entertainment
fun
is
stuff?
allowed. Entertainment's
Okay.
allowed. Yep. The only thing you can't do, Stacey, is like you can't take cash out. Like they're trying to capture those expenses on the back end and not have you turn in all the receipts. So like you're using it as a card for those expenses so they can see what they are on the back end. So like you're not going to get $20 out in cash and go spend it because then you have to turn in the receipt. Like you want to use the card how it's functioning so that you can justify all those expenses on the back end.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I have another question. It's about third-party special needs trusts that are pooled with a nonprofit organization.
Yeah, pooled trusts.
Yeah. Can you talk about what that is, how that's different from a regular special needs trust?
Yeah, yeah. So different states have different pool trust options. And sometimes they have first and third. So that is kind of your first distinction. Does the pooled trust that I'm looking at have a first party and a third party option? I really like those options when they're an only child or you don't need the money if there's money left over to go to somebody else. Because usually like the one in Washington, I'm in Washington State and it's sponsored by the Arc of Washington, right? So if I wasn't kind of worried about making sure Charlie was taken care of as well with our estate planning, then I would say I'm going to go to the Washington DDD trust. And whatever Ruth doesn't use, then the Arc of Washington gets to benefit because the Arc of Washington's awesome, right? And so it's really a where do you want the money to go if they don't end up using it all kind of question.
Sure.
They are very inexpensive. They are very amazing in that way where you can it's way cheaper than going to a lawyer on your own. So you can then do that and have it be cheaper. They have specific type of just grouped investments. So you just pick what investment kind of options you want for that trust money. So I like our states. I've seen states that I loved and I've seen states that I didn't really kind of love in the pool trust space. So you got to be very, just do your research on how they work.
How,
The
how would I
benefits.
know? How
Well,
would I
you know
know if
what?
I'm
Stacy, I'm gonna let you message Mary if you want to do a follow-up
Oh,
question
sure.
because we're running out of time.
Yeah.
And I know there's two people, Jennifer and Catherine, with your arms raised. But first, I want to go to the chat. There's a mom who's in stage one, Mary,
Yeah, she is.
and she wants to know what would be the suggested first steps.
Yeah, Amy, I love this question. My instincts tell me to enjoy your baby until they're 3. I want you to love your baby. You're in a really hefty stage. And get through the early intervention and apply for the waiver in your state when your child turns 3, and then come call me and I'll help you kind of navigate after that. But like you are in just a real hefty stage of I can't even imagine thinking about this stuff when I was in your stage. I think that's why I'm telling you that. I would gladly take you and help you if you are a super planner, because I do know super planners that have kids that are 1 and I've helped them. But I do really want you to enjoy that babe. So
Yeah, I mean, I would also counsel this, just having lived in that life. And again, at 15 months old, I knew my son had a disease that it was progressive in nature, debilitating, and highly likely that he might not see adulthood. But I would also say if that is your circumstance, you should seek a lawyer because you're going to want to set up some sort of trust. Should, God forbid, something happen to you, you would want to insure yourself well enough to provide for care. But then we're going to go to Jennifer, who had her hand up, and then Catherine will go to you after that. So Jennifer, if you still would like to ask your question, please feel free to do it
Yes.
verbally.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Thank you so much. First of all, this was so helpful. My question is about the rental support
Yeah.
agreement.
Yep.
Is there like a sample one that we can use? And also I've read that in order to come up with like that number, you should take your mortgage and your household like bills divided by the number of people. Is that accurate?
Yep, those are 2 great questions. I believe we have a template. I'm gonna have to I'll message one of my partners and see if we have a template still. We had one, but it was just so simple that I was like, is this really needed? So you can
Okay.
just say this is a support agreement. And what I did when I was helping another family navigate this is there's 2 answers to that because it depends on where you live. Like
New York.
my bestie Lindsay here lives in Seattle, and you can add that stuff up and equal that out, but there's also a housing market comparable, right? So in the Seattle market, it's bananas. And to rent a room, it'd probably be like $2,500. I have no idea, but something bananas, right? So
Yeah.
for like those people, I'm like, you could charge over what you're gonna get for SSI because your price to be able to rent out that room is crazy bananas. And if you live in a major metropolitan area, that's not really comparable to adding up all your bills. Also, you're going to pay off your mortgage at some point. So like that kind of discounts you because you've already paid off your mortgage, right? So
Okay.
you can do both ways. So you can look at current market value, and I encourage people to print it out. If you can find a current market value of a rental of a room that's about your size, then have that as backup. You can also add up all your bills, mortgage, utilities, cable, property tax, add all that up, divide it by the amount of people that live in the house, and you can put that out there too. I've seen it done both ways and it's been accepted by SSI.
Okay.
Great.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Okay, Catherine, I think you're up if you would like to ask your question, and then I think we're going to close it out for the evening.
First of all, thank you so much for doing this. I guess when I was in stage 1, I did attend some things, but I think my daughter's now 18 and a half, and there wasn't an organization like this. So I think as time has gone on, information has been provided in a more helpful way. And there was no Zoom then. Anyway, but my question is, so if there is an ABLE account and a special needs trust, how do you arrange for, in the event that the person with special needs passes away, how do you, I guess, how do you legally, what do you
How do we
do?
close this out? How do we close
Like,
this
do
out?
you have a will for the person? Person?
Yes. You mean your person's 18, and then how do we decide where the money goes post them passing
Meaning,
away?
like, God forbid she
Yeah.
passed away early
Yep.
and she has all this money in a special needs trust.
Yeah, they're both named out beneficiary vehicles. Oh, I lost you. Okay, you moved. Okay, so they're both named out beneficiary type of vehicles. So you can name out a beneficiary from a ABLE, and you can name out a beneficiary from a special needs trust.
So it's just in the legal document of the trust.
It's in the legal document who should be second, right? It's like life insurance. Life insurance is a name out beneficiary, so it doesn't pass through. This is like a legal probate question. Like those mechanisms don't go through probate. They don't pass through the probate process. They're named out beneficiary vehicles. They work outside of the estate. Okay, so those two are the same, which is very helpful because getting a will then for your loved one because you're the guardian and going through that's intense, right? That's a lot of things to go through. But you should be able to name out, like, on a third party specifically. In a first party, Medicaid will be first, and if there's anything left after that, you can name out a beneficiary as well, but those are named out beneficiary types of things.
Thank you.
Yeah, great question. I haven't had that one, but yes, I love that.
All right, I want to say thank you very much to Mary. As you can see, I hope my lead-in sold her well and right. She really does tend to the emotional components of this and thinks about it globally and expansively and takes into consideration those moments where we all need to step back and say, hey, wait a minute, I can't cope with this in the moment because I'm either too busy with my caregiving or it's overwhelming me emotionally.